Holmes is due to appear in court tomorrow, where he will be charged with 12 counts of first-degree murder and about 60 other offenses relating to the massacre at the premiere of The Dark Knight Rises. As we learn more about the shooting suspect, we seem to all have more questions than answers in regard to who this young man is and why he would do such a thing. This morning, Wendy Patrick, she's a lecturer at SDSU, she joins me to talk about this very topic. We've had about a week now to digest, and I think, as I mentioned, still a lot more questions and answers out there. What is the biggest thing about this young man to you that stands out, that either makes him possibly a psychopath or possibly not? I mean, who is this guy to you?
You know, that has changed day to day as we've gotten more and more information. I know that about a week ago, a lot of the people that were talking on TV about what they knew about him were saying, oh, he definitely looks like a potential psychopath. He demonstrates lack of remorse, no guilt, shallow feelings, narcissism, etc. What I think we've seen since then is an awful lot of information that perhaps points away from that diagnosis and maybe towards one more of psychosis, of the kind of mental illness more indicative of schizophrenia than the character traits that point towards psychopathy. The interesting thing about this debate is you can get psychologists on either side looking at different things, coming up with different ideas, but you really obviously, you'd have to see him to really make an accurate diagnosis.
I think for the average person on the street, I'm going to use myself as an example, I've researched this story a lot, come to my own opinions, drawn my own conclusions, and the one thing about it is you can go either way on this, and I think that's what scares people a lot, is we're so used to when you see somebody that does something like this, you automatically, there were tons of red flags we should have looked for. With this young man, a lot of people saying there weren't those obvious red flags. So what do you do when you're studying this young man? What are the people that are going to be doctors, mental evaluators, what are they going to be looking for in this?
Courtney, that's an excellent observation. We are so quick to say, well, gosh, here's all the things people should have seen, when the reality of it is each of us wouldn't necessarily be doing some kind of a criminal profile investigation on everybody that we interact with. In order to really be able to find red flags, you've got to pay attention, and that just doesn't mean paying attention to what they look like. Paying attention to how they conduct themselves, how do they sound, what's their voice quality, what words do they use, what do they do when they're not at work, what does their apartment look like? Gosh, wouldn't that have been something we would have liked to have known in the case of this young man. But the footage that came to light when he was 18 at the science camp has really been telling for a lot of different reasons. One of the things it did in a lot of the minds of, talk about what does the public think, is those red flags seem to not be present in that video. In other words, this characteristic narcissism, this sort of glibness, superficiality, isn't really present in that science video when he was 18 years old. So you'd almost have to believe that those traits emerged in the last 6 years, or that perhaps what we're looking at is something that's consistent with the topic of that science video, alternate realities, fantasies, changing the past. That, in the minds of a lot of the psychologists that have been commenting, and in the minds of the general public, seem to be more consistent with his behavior on the night of the shooting, rather than somebody that just did it for attention.
Right. You co-authored a book, Reading People. You look at people's behaviors. You try and understand why people do the things they do. Is there any way you could understand why someone would do something like this?
There is, if you have enough information to work with, and that's actually one of the things that businesses are now struggling with is, on the front end, how can we learn to be good enough people readers where we're able to see red flags and be able to keep the public that comes to frequent our establishments safe? Do we hire criminal profiles to take tickets in movie theaters? Do we want to pass that cost on to the consumer? We ought to buy our Netflix stock right now if that's the route it's going to go. Or alternatively, do we put the burden on the kinds of maybe young people that apply for those jobs to put themselves through school, putting the weight of the world on their shoulders, saying, well, here's the signs you have to look out for to keep the rest of the theater goers safe? It really should also, some responsibility, as we're all saying, sort of lies on us to be more aware of our surroundings. And as you say, to read somebody, you've got to look, listen, watch them over time, know something about their background, know what they're like when they're not in the workforce. You've really got to get an enormous amount of material to make it an accurate, I almost want to say diagnosis, because that's what we're all talking about. And we're able to do that more and more with each passing day with respect to James Holmes. But I'll bet next week we'll have even more information to work with.
Wendy, tomorrow he will be in court, second court appearance. Last question for you. What do you expect his attitude is going to be in court tomorrow?
Isn't that going to be, it's going to be a surprise to all of us. It's one thing, and you're very comfortable with being in front of a camera. It's quite another to have cameras pointed at you, folks all over the world are watching, and then we look and we try to analyze someone's behavior in that environment.
Yeah.
It's probably an unusual environment for anyone, so it's hard to say how much, if anything, we can glean from his behavior under those circumstances. But I got to tell you, we're all waiting to see what happens, see if it's anywhere near the last time.
Yeah, exactly. All right, thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming in. We always appreciate your insights. All right, Hyundai